Thank you for tuning in and welcome to our virtual town hall. For the next hour, our panel of experts will guide you through what you need to know about the federal government's coronavirus relief package or the CARES Act as it pertains to small businesses. Let's meet our panelists and get started. Congressman Carson, U.S. Representative for Indiana's 7th Congressional District, now in his 6th term in the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman Carson has established himself as an influential leader and respected public servant, fighting for good paying jobs, economic growth, and safer communities for Indiana's working families. Congressman Carson consistently fights for the middle class, securing hundreds of millions for investments in public safety, education, infrastructure, and the creation and protection of thousands of good paying jobs. Welcome, Congressman Carson. Our next guest, Mr. Stacey Poynter, the SBA District Director of the Indiana District Office of the U.S. Small Business Administration. As the U.S. Small Business Administration's Indiana District Director, Stacey Poynter is responsible for the delivery of SBA's programs and services, including funding business advising and government contracting assistance throughout the state. He oversees coordination of services between the district office team, other federal agencies, more than 120 lending institutions, and state and local resource partners, including the Indiana Small Business Development Centers, SCORE chapters, and Women Business Centers. So welcome, Mr. Poynter. And our third panelist is Maria Earley. She is a partner with the international law firm of Reed Smith in Washington, D.C. Maria is a financial services regulatory and enforcement partner in the Washington, D.C. office. She is a former Consumer Financial Protection Bureau enforcement attorney with particular expertise on issues related to consumer protection laws and emerging technology. She advises and represents financial services and fintech companies with respect to product development, regulatory compliance, state and federal enforcement and examination, state licensing, and transactional matters. We'll start, we can get our town hall going, and I think we'll start with you, Congressman Carson. What exactly are the provisions in the CARES Act as it pertains to small businesses, independent contractors, entrepreneurs, and more?
The third phase is known as CARES. We are now working on what is being dubbed, as we spoke a few days ago, Madam Cosby, CARES 2. So the first phase dealt with the CDC and billions of dollars going to the CDC, more than $3 billion going toward a vaccination, and over $300 million in aid for other countries battling the virus. Phase 2 dealt with COVID testing for everyone, paid emergency leave, strengthening food security initiatives. The current CARES Act, two needs, particularly $130 billion to hospitals, direct checks to Americans, the $1,200 that everyone's talking about, $2,400 for families with a combined income of $150. What is clear is that we're having more concerns as it relates to going forward. So what does that look like? It means that we've been working with banking institutions to make sure small women and minority-owned businesses get the access that they need. We're trying to incent banks to come aboard and lend money. We have found that banking institutions, and the scholars on this call will speak more directly to it, have been a bit reluctant during these times. We spoke with Janet Yellen with the Fed, and many people were asking if the Fed could even issue grants or loans, and that's something that is not a part of the Fed's directive. They don't want to take that kind of risk. But what we're trying to do is now talk about extended unemployment insurance. We're talking about having over $10 billion go to airports and federal assist right now. Track is looking at getting a capital infusion of over $1 billion because the rail industry has been hurt, as with the aviation industry. But we're trying to really provide stability and make sure our healthcare workers are protected. The fourth phase will deal with criminal justice reform, working with the Bureau of Prisons, working with our jails, county and state and otherwise, and making sure that they have the resources that they need so our doesn't get infected as well.
Indeed. Mr. Poynter, can you give us an overview of how things look on your end from the Small Business Administration, including the rules of the program, how it works, how to apply, and more?
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Tina, and I appreciate Congressman Carson jumping on the call, this call with us, and we really appreciate his support. Our team is in constant communication with his team, and we've been working together to try to help folks in his district and all across Indiana. So we really appreciate the support. So yes, we have the CARES Act provided three main components, which is the advance of up to $10,000 per employee. We've heard the term grant forgivable, but it's $10,000 that does not have to be paid back under the Economic Injury Disaster Advance Program. We have a brand new loan program that started last week called the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP for short, and that's where we use area lenders to help administer the program, and that is going like gangbusters. I believe we're already over $100 billion in less than a week, which is just incredible. It was incredible that we had the program stood up in a week from the couple Fridays ago when the act was passed by Congress and signed by the president to a week later, the program started, and here we are less than a week after it started, and we're already over $100 billion of approvals, which is just unprecedented. And then we also, for current SBA loans, are what we call our 7A and 504 microloans, which are specific loan programs. We have a relief making the payments for those programs for 6 months, which is a great stress relief for those folks already in the SBA program to allow them to help with their cash flow.
Indeed, thank you. And Maria, Attorney Maria Earley, can you give us perspective from where you sit and how things are going, especially from the legal perspective and financial, along with the rules?
Say thank you for having me today.
Thank
and
you.
I especially want to say thank you to Stacey and all of his colleagues at the SBA, because he's right. They stood up a loan program in less than a week, which is huge. A $350 billion completely new relief program in less than a week. It builds off of the existing small business loan program, but it really is a new program, and it essentially incentivizes small businesses to keep people on payroll. You will get up to 2.5 times your monthly payroll through this loan program. And if you use 75% of it for payroll, and then you can use 25% for other things like rent and utilities, then it is 100% forgivable. And that's a big deal, because we have so many small businesses, and I've seen it from the day this act was passed up through just minutes before jumping on this call. We have people calling 24/7, help me figure this out, help me figure out how do I calculate my payroll, which lender should I go to? I don't want to lay off more of my people. They need to put, feed their families and put food on the table. So that's what we've been seeing, and we've been seeing it nationwide. So obviously it's not just hitting Indiana, but it's hitting, really hard, from coast to coast. And then here in the DC area, which is where I am, we've been on stay-at-home orders and shutdown orders for a couple of weeks now. So, there have been people, especially in the restaurant business, that have been laid off for 2 or 3 weeks. So we're seeing it really hit hard. But this loan program, the PPP program that Stacey mentioned, is the one that's getting the most attention right now.
And so we want to remind our viewers, and if you're listening as well, you can join the conversation in terms of submitting questions to any of our panelists. So please feel free to send those in. And this question is for anybody that wants to take it. How do we make sure that the money gets to the right people? Because there's a lot of opportunity, I guess, for fraud, and there's still a lot of confusion about how it all is going to settle in anyway. How can we make sure that the money gets to who it's supposed to get to? And anybody can take that.
Well, I think you mentioned fraud, and we've heard some instances where folks are trying to take advantage of folks already, as you can imagine. That usually happens in this kind of situation. It's a shame and unfortunate, but make sure if you're trying to deal with the SBA, it's sba.gov for gov. Make sure that's the correct email address. Make sure it's not from a .com or something like that. If folks are willing to help you and asking for money, that could be a concern. It could be legitimate. It could be a concern, but make sure you do your due diligence. we are always available as a resource to help you. As you can tell, I'm working from home. Our office is working remotely, but we're all available to help. So if you call our district office at 317-226-7272, you're going to get an answering machine. It asks you to leave a message or to send us an email at the Indiana district office email box, which says indiana@sba.gov. If you'll send us an email, we have people, all of our team is working remotely, and we are responding to everyone that calls us or messages us. So if you're unsure, reach out to us directly, and we can help navigate you through what you're looking at to make sure what you're doing is correct.
One of our listeners has written in and says that they've applied for 2 different programs, I do believe, and they have not heard anything yet. They wanted to know if any of the panelists could speak to that.
I certainly can. I don't know if the Congressman wants to speak first, though.
I couldn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
They've applied to a couple of the and have not heard anything yet.
I can't.
We have a few viewers who have said, I've applied for both SBA programs and haven't heard anything.
Let me go ahead and take that.
Yeah, it would be.
I can hear Stacey, but I can't hear you, Tina.
You can't hear me? I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead and,
can you hear me?
I'll go ahead and take
Okay,
that.
well, go ahead,
Okay.
Stacey, and maybe they can fix that while we're talking.
Sure. So
Go ahead.
there's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So let's just kind of talk about those programs for just a little bit. So that's a direct loan through SBA. It's the only time the SBA gets involved in making loan directly. Normally, in a normal environment, we work with our area lenders to make the loans, and we provide what's called a guarantee in most situations. With this Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which has been available for a couple of weeks now, we do those loans directly. So that began, Indiana was the first in the Midwest that was declared, first state that was declared. So thanks in partnership with the Indiana Small Business Development Center, myself, and of course the governor, we were able to get the information to him quickly. The governor was able to ask for the declaration. Unfortunately, we weren't one of the first in the country. I think we're about 15th in states in the country, but we were definitely the first in the Midwest. So about 3 Wednesdays ago, that the portal opened up to allow people to start asking for that loan, that Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. But as you can imagine, when the rest of the country got declared, the system got pretty loaded down, and they're trying to process those loans as fast as possible. Last Monday, we opened up a new portal, and we asked folks if they wanted to take advantage of the $10,000 Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance, which was part of the CARES Act that had just been passed. We needed to reapply under the new portal to be able to get to the advance. So those loans are just now starting to get processed and dispersed. As a matter of fact, I got breaking news literally 15 minutes before we went on this call that the advanced loans or the advanced grants are going to start within the next 24 hours, I'm told. I'll put that in quotes. So within the next 24 hours that they're going to start going out. So yeah, it's very common. That's the question we're getting, my team's getting all the time, is where are we at in the application queue? Have those loans went out? They are processing those loans. But that is a question we're getting a lot.
Okay.
On the PPP loan, those go through the area lenders. Those are meant to be quicker, and there's been several of those. Again, I've been told there's been $100 billion already processed. Now that doesn't mean the loans are out the door, but they've been approved. The lenders are working with them to get those loans out the door. That will be a faster process working through your area lender versus going through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which comes from the government. So it's 2 different programs. I know people are hurting. We understand that. We're working as fast as we can to try to get those out the door, but that is a common question that I'm getting a lot.
Indeed. Next question. A few have asked, what if their bank stopped taking applications? What if their bank stopped taking applications?
It's up to the lender. It's not just banks. Credit unions can do these loans as well as fintech companies are coming aboard. But it is up to the lender whether, number one, whether they want to participate in the program or not. Number two, if they just want to participate for their own customers or when they stop. I mean, the loans are made directly by the lenders. There will be a forgiveness in the back at the end of the program. So the government will make the lenders whole at the end of the program. But initially, to start with, I mean, this is the lender's money that they're lending out. So they, just like everybody else, they have a certain amount of capital they have allocated to be able to lend out. So that does happen.
Maria, can you weigh in on that question as well?
Yeah.
Because I think you offer another perspective. Yeah,
Yeah, we're seeing this a lot. We're seeing this a lot where we're having clients go to one bank and either their portal wasn't open, and this was in the early days, their portal wasn't open for PPP applications, or they were having trouble getting through. We have seen so much success if you go to the smaller community banks. Don't forget about the credit unions. Even if it's a bank that you don't have a relationship with, sometimes you just have to try a different path, because every bank is different, and where the amounts are able to lend and their lending limits are going to be different. So if you meet, a hurdle at your usual bank, try a different bank, because some of them are ready to go and they're ready to take these applications, and they really do want to prioritize applications from, smaller companies.
And you know what, the question that comes to mind is there are some smaller businesses that don't have relationships with any banks whatsoever, and they're kind of left out of this process in a way. What is your advice to them?
Well, I mean, we have heard that question, obviously, or that concern. As Maria said, there are other institutions they can try to go to. Well, we know there's some fintech companies or financial technological companies that are coming online to try to do some of these loans. The economic injury disaster loan, you don't have to have a lender. That's directly through the SBA, through the government. So that is one option where they can get the advance up to $10,000. But it is a concern. It is a concern we're hearing. I'm sure the congressman's hearing that concern as well.
Okay. Someone had also mentioned, and this is for Maria, I think you could probably answer this, that they are the only employee for their company and they are scared to take out a loan because of debt. Any advice on that?
Well, I mean, I think there's the PPP loan, which can be completely forgiven if you use it for payroll. And if you're a single person, if you're using it to supplement or to fill in for what you would have made in income, then that would be forgivable. And then Stacey has talked about the economic injury disaster program where you get the $10,000. And I don't want to misspeak, but my understanding is that is considered a grant and you can get that fairly quickly. So I think that at this point, you really have to try all of these different resources. And I should say that with the PPP loan, any portion that's not forgivable. So it will become a grant if you use it to sort of, take over what would have been your income. But even if you don't, the portion that's not forgivable becomes a 1% loan, and you have 2 years to pay it off. So it's worth taking if you need that money today and you're not getting paid today. Really weigh the benefit of getting that today and being able to sustain yourself versus worrying about what is really should be forgivable but would then be a 1% loan where you have a 2-year period to pay it off.
Thank you, Maria. Congressman Carson, here in Indianapolis, where can you direct people to go, and what resources are available locally? Is it Congressman? Congressman Carson, can you hear me? We might be having some difficulty there with Congressman Carson's. So Stacey and or Maria, either one. What are there a number of locally based resources that you're seeing come to mind that can bridge some of this gap?
Yeah, I mean,
you've got to find legitimate ones as well, but
I'm SBA, so I'm representing the federal government here, but obviously we have a lot of partnerships. I'm in Indianapolis. The Women's Business Center is hosted by Business Ownership Initiative. Make sure I get it right. BOI. We always work in acronyms in the government world, so you kind of forget what the actual.
I got to keep up. It's hard to keep up.
So the Women's Business Center in Indianapolis, there's 2 in Indiana, 1 in Fort Wayne, 1 in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. The one in Indianapolis is hosted by BOI. BOI is hosted by the Indianapolis Chamber, and they have done a fantastic job with their small business hub that they have. I know I'm probably butchering the name, but they have a hub to help small businesses, a portal. And so they do a fantastic job. And I know it's happening in other communities. Obviously, what I do is represent the SBA here. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make a couple of clarifying points. Maria was talking and making some fantastic points there a while ago. Yeah. If you're a sole proprietor or a contractor, the PPP loan actually starts for you tomorrow. So the initial wave was for folks with employees, but for the sole props and the contractors, it starts tomorrow. And one clarifying point on the EIDL advance, and this is part of the breaking news that I can share. It's up to $10,000, and it is a grant or forgivable, how you want to say it. So back to your question, Tina, about if you're sole proprietor and you don't want to take out a loan, you could always apply for the EIDL advance. Now it's only actually going to get you $1,000 because it's $1,000 per employee. We've come out with that language in the last few minutes in order to try to impact and help the greatest number of applicants across the country that we can. We've made a decision that it's going to be $1,000 per employee, up to 10 employees. So you'd have to have 10 or more employees to get the $10,000. But that is an advance grant, forgivable, however you want to say it. It's money that doesn't have to be paid back.
Indeed, indeed. And Congressman Carson, we're going to try to get you in here. I think we have a mute problem with your mic. So if you can unmute it on your end. There we go. There we have you now. Are you back with us, Congressman? Okay, Congressman.
Let me see if he can hear. He said Congressman Carson,
can you hear Maria and I can hear Stacey, but I can't hear Tina.
Okay. Well, we'll keep working.
Tina, do you want me to ask him the question about the local resources?
Yes, exactly. Indianapolis and local resources for people right here.
Sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria. That's a great solution there.
Okay. Congressman Carson, so since you can hear me, I'll ask the question. We're trying to help listeners understand what local resources might be available, and we thought you might be able to provide some information about those.
Yeah, well, I think that in a very real sense, the money that will be allotted, there was a huge dispute earlier about nonprofits and houses of worship receiving money. Originally, under the negotiation or agreement, houses of worship they couldn't receive money directly. They had to receive money, or they couldn't receive money, but a nonprofit or NGO affiliated with the house of worship could receive the funding. Now, under the new agreement, because this thing has been very fluid, houses of worship can receive money themselves, and regardless of where one stands in terms of separation of church and state, which I support, I think it's important to know synagogues, temples do a tremendous job where government can't do. And so in terms of senior care, in terms of food pantries, in terms of addressing the critical needs of even food deserts, that's a piece of it. Traditional NGOs and nonprofits will be getting funding. And of course, we know the incentive where an employer, whether a small business or a nonprofit, who chooses to pay the benefits of an employee and cover their pay for roughly around 2 months or 10 weeks, they can get that portion of the loan forgiven, and you can speak more directly to it. But in addition to that, I think it's important to note that you can reach out to our office, you can reach out to your senator's office, and you can reach out to others who are your direct link to Congress. Indy Chamber is a great resource. The Black Chamber is a resource in terms of talking about access to capitals. One of the things that we also talked about in this negotiation was those smaller businesses folks who are self-employed, or folks who may have 1 or 2 employees, those folks who have lawn care services, those folks who do snow removal in the winter, estheticians, people who run smoke shops, barbers, beauticians. All of those folks have and will be considered more broadly in what's being dubbed as the CARE 2 Act.
How do people, well, let's go back to a viewer call. I'll get back to that question later. Viewer Stephanie Kirkland has asked, can someone speak to unemployment for people who are self-employed? Are the unemployed entitled to benefits? If you're unemployed because of self-employment, are you entitled to benefits?
That's not an SBA question. We could ask the congressman, or if Maria has an answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. Again, Congress.
I didn't hear the question.
A viewer has asked, can someone speak to unemployment for self-employed? So I'm assuming they're asking, are people who are self-employed entitled to unemployment insurance benefits? And Maria,
I can repeat that.
Can you repeat
Congressman Carson? Yeah, we have a question from somebody who wants to know whether or not someone who is self-employed is entitled to unemployment benefits.
It's a great question. The answer is yes.
Okay, what is the process? How do they go about?
And that is primarily because even though they're self-employed, they do have an employer, which is arguably the client or themselves, and they are taxpayers, and so their taxpayer dollars, as long as they aren't in violation and meet the requirements, absolutely they can receive unemployment benefits. It's a good question.
Okay.
Can I add to that as well? And I think we might have, I know Stacey might be able to speak to this as well, but the program that we were talking about earlier, the PPP, is available for independent contractors, and that process opens tomorrow. And so if you are self-employed and you're able to apply, you should. And, you know, I think somebody said something earlier, maybe it was Stacey, about fraud. We're hearing that too. It's really sad and it's a real shame. But there are people who are opportunists, and they'll say, oh, you want this government money and we can help you. And you just pay me a little bit and I'll help you get it. And the next thing you know, they've run off with your money or your identity or both. And what I would say to people is, Stacey and his team have worked really hard to make this application user-friendly. You can do this on your own. Don't be nervous because it's the government and because it's a lot of money. Go to the SBA website, look at the application, you know, look at your own documentation, get as far as you can. And if you get hung up, call the SBA, but don't give money to some of these people who are, you know, they're really opportunists, and we're seeing it, and they're taking advantage right now of people's, you know, really tough situation. But that PPP loan is available to independent contractors. And again, if you use it as a replacement for your normal income, it is 100% forgivable.
Maria, following up on that point, what are the documents, basic documents that someone is going to need to apply for this money? And what can you tell them as far as what those documents should be, which also could help them identify possible fraudulent attempts to get their money?
Okay, I'm going to say this, and Stacey's going to keep me honest. I feel like, you know, I'm the student and he's the teacher, so he'll correct me if I'm wrong. But if you know, if you're a small business and you have a few employees and you have payroll documentation, that's what you're going to submit. If you're an independent contractor and you don't have payroll documentation, you can use bank statements or other records that will show, you know, what your income is. And it's pretty well spelled out in the application. The application itself is one page. Then there's some certifications and authorizations, and you should read those carefully. Those are important for you to read and understand before you sign. And then there's a couple pages of instructions. And then again, on the SBA website, there's a lot of good information, and it will help you walk through what you need. But it's very basic, that very brief application, payroll documentation if you are a small business, and if you're an independent contractor, you know, if you have 1099s, or if you have some sort of bank statement or other records that show your income. But I'm gonna see if Stacey gives me an A or B, or what do I get, Stacey, in terms of my grade?
Okay, Stacey, go ahead. Go ahead.
I give you just I'm sure we're clear on things. There's two different programs we're talking about here. So we're talking about the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection. That goes through the area lenders. And as Maria mentioned, it's on our website, and I know that's been scrolling across the bottom. There's two websites I would want to direct you to. One is the coronavirus site that SBA has, which is sba.gov/coronavirus. That's all things coronavirus are listed on there. From that, you can get to the EIDL loan program, the economic injury disaster loan. You can get to the Paycheck Protection or the PPP program. Or if you just want to know about the PPP directly, you can go to sba.gov/paycheck protection. But the coronavirus will get you all those sites. So again, two different loan programs. So Maria was speaking mostly there to the Paycheck Protection, the PPP loan. The application is online. It's one page with one page of certifications. It walks you through, and 2 pages of disclosures. So it's 4 pages total, but 1 page that you really have to fill out. And it'll walk you through that. You can have that before you go to your lender. But filling out that application in and of itself does nothing. You have to take it to your lender because they're the one that actually processes the loan and puts the loan through. You can't take that application and send it to me. We don't do those loans directly. What we do directly is the economic injury disaster loans. And if you go to the coronavirus website, click on the funding options that are available, you'll see the economic injury disaster loan. You apply for that directly at the SBA website, the SBA portal. If you're not in an SBA.gov situation, you're at the wrong place. but two different programs. People are getting those confused.
So for the latter program, what level or what degree, and Congressman, you may be able to answer this, or any of you, what degree of hardship has to be established to be able to apply for a hardship loan?
Well, I mean, it's not very difficult right now. You have to basically show that you've been impacted by the virus. You have to show that you're a small business, which is relative. 99% of the businesses in Indiana are considered small. That's usually not a problem. Just to give you a rule of thumb, it's 500 employees, but that rule of thumb, it actually depends on what industry you're in. There's some that you can have more employees than that. But that's a good rule of thumb. Like I said, 99% of it. That's usually not a problem to get to that, and you'll be able to show that you've been impacted. There's 30 million small businesses in America, and I'm sure all of them have been impacted by this. So that is not as big of an issue. Is just making sure that you're doing the proper things. You're finding a lender on the PPP side. You're getting the disaster loan filled out. That's more it than anything, but just showing that you have a hardship.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the viewer because I keep having these questions. But anyway, another viewer has asked, for self-employed, do they collect unemployment from the state or country or county from which the company is registered and pays taxes? The viewer says, I'm living in a different city right now than where my business is based.
I might ask that to the congressman.
Do you want me to? Yeah, I can ask that question, Tina, because I can see it. Congressman Carson, there's a question here. Again, this is about somebody who's self-employed and unemployment, and they're asking a specific question. Do they collect that unemployment from the state or county from which the company is registered and pays taxes? In particular, they're concerned because they're living in a different city right now than where the business is based. And I think this just shows, how, it's hard to get this information and people are confused about where they should go, but they're worried about getting the unemployment and where they should go, state, county, where the business is or where they are.
That money would come. That's a good question. That money would come from the state.
It will. That's a quick answer. Congressman, another question, a follow-up question for you. How long of a period of time was this relief designed for as far as getting small business from point A to point B? Is it a 4-month span of time, 3-month span of time, 6 months? What's the time span that this program was designed for?
So, Congressman Carson, the question is, how long were these programs designed to last? What was the span of time that these programs were designed to help small businesses? Are we talking 4 months, 6 months, 3 months? What is the horizon here for this relief?
Well, I think the idea obviously isn't indefinite. I think it would be a reasonable amount of time, and what's reasonable for one business may not be reasonable for another business. But what is clear is that the intention is not to have the government be a part of this recovery effort and have a business in debt. I've had so many small businesses reach out to me being concerned about assuming additional debt. I think that's a very legitimate question. Even more so, minority-owned businesses where the barriers to entry seem to be higher, where historically and institutionally they have not had the same kind of access that other businesses get. But I think that the language says a reasonable amount of time. May it be 6 months, may it be a year, 2 years, or 3 years. That all depends. So there's no set timetable. It just depends on the needs of the business.
What about African American and minority-owned businesses in Indianapolis and Central Indiana? What are they looking at here? Maria, if you could translate that to him, please.
Yeah. So, Congressman Carson, a follow-up there is, what about African American owned businesses in Indiana, and what are we looking at there with respect specifically to African American owned businesses?
Well, that's a big part that the Congressional Black Caucus we've been working with Speaker Pelosi along with the Hispanic Caucus in terms of encouraging banks to work with these folks. Banks who obviously, tend to be risk averse. And right now they're dealing with their clients and their folks and their traditional customers. So we're trying to figure out ways in which we can incent banks to do more with minority-owned businesses. Typically, minority-owned businesses don't have the kind of collateral that would be needed to build the kind of trust that's necessary to have a relationship with the banking institution. We do know, though, that going forward, we're trying to navigate around a way we can work with the banks. Over a decade ago, during the financial collapse, to your point, there were many bad actors. And as a result, banks have felt burned by not just doing businesses with small businesses in this kind of crisis situation, but doing business with most businesses that they don't have a transactional relationship with. And so we're trying to figure out ways in which we can incent banks to participate in this, because as we saw with the economic downturn over 10 years ago, we are all interconnected.
Indeed.
I just wanted to make one follow-up point there to the Congressman and more broadly, talking about access for particularly African-American and minority-owned businesses. And Stacey said this earlier. What seemed to be left out of this early on were the fintechs, partly because I guess SBA had already had relationships with financial institutions, so more traditional banks. But think about somebody like a PayPal. I mean, you've got so many small businesses that have already been vetted and they have small business PayPal accounts, and PayPal wasn't in the mix. And so, some of those barriers that you're talking about, Congressman Carson, I think there are some existing, institutions that have those kinds of processes in place where they've already vetted some of these businesses, maybe not the way a bank has, but to be honest, and this is where I practice in the fintech space, the reason why fintech has evolved is because many of the banks left many of us behind, and fintechs are filling that gap. So I would like to see fintechs be involved in the next round. And if there's any way you can, encourage your, fellow Congress people to think about that, and I know some of them are, I think that could really be a way to get to some of the communities and the people and the businesses that need this help the most. That's just my personal view. So I'm just sharing my personal view.
I can
you bring everyone who might not be familiar with the term fintech?
Yeah,
bring them in?
already have folks like PayPal
Okay, go ahead.
lending in terms of PPP, but that's a phenomenal point. I founding fathers, as complicated as they were, had good intentions. 10 years ago, when we had President Obama and we had control of the House, the Congressional Black Caucus was able to negotiate with the Obama administration a Office of Women and Minority Affairs under the financial services umbrella within the government. And that arm was able to make negotiations on behalf of women and minority-owned firms. But the fintech space is unexplored very deeply. I think we should tap into it, but we need folks like you informing us. So when I go through these daily calls, we have 6 or 7 a day. It's a point that we could bring up in terms of negotiations for the next few installments. It won't stop at the CARES 2. There will be an additional 2 or 3 more installments after this. So it's very important. Thank you.
Indeed. And Maria, very quickly, in case anyone might not be familiar with the term or know what it is, fintech, can you explain that very quickly for us?
I just look at it as the way we've had, products and financial products delivered being done through technology. So being done through our computers and our devices, that's all it is. It's nothing new. It's just we've all used Venmo or PayPal or whatever to send some money. We've all maybe gotten a loan online. There are companies that build the plumbing behind the scenes to facilitate those loans. There are companies like PayPal who have figured out how to help us move money and buy things all electronically. And so that's what I mean by fintech.
Okay. Yeah, indeed.
On that,
go ahead, Stacey.
SBA is offering an expedited service to sign up new lenders. So for those fintech companies or other traditional lenders that, because not all traditional lenders have a relationship with SBA, we're opening up a new portal to be able to expedite those, to have more lenders come in to be able to offer these services. So SBA recognizes that, and we're trying to bring new lenders aboard every day.
Okay, we've got several questions I want to get to before it gets too late. One, a viewer, and you all may have answered this, but I want to get it in there anyway. A viewer has asked, is there still a new PPP application for self-employed S-Corp freelancer Oh, okay. It says the viewer was told it opens up on April 10th.
Yes.
That application. Is that correct? That's correct, right?
Yeah, so the PPP started on last Friday on April 3rd, but for independent contractors and self-employed, it opens up tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So they'll all be open tomorrow.
Okay. The next question, what is the maximum or minimum that can be borrowed and who makes that determination?
Two different loan programs. On the economic injury disaster loan that goes through the SBA, the maximum is $2 million. I don't know if I've had anybody ask me the minimum. I guess the minimum is whatever you apply for on the minimum side. But and also make sure you try to take advantage of the advance, which that's the forgivable or grant portion of it that goes up to $10,000 if you have 10 employees, $1,000 per employee. So the maximum is $2 million on the economic injury disaster loan. Flip it over to the PPP, the maximum is 10 million, but it's a percentage of your, so it's basically 8 weeks of payroll is how it's calculated. It's 2.5% of your average monthly payroll, but 75% of it has to be for payroll to be forgiven.
Okay. For the congressman or, yeah, I think this is congressman. Anyway, another viewer asked, do you have to have an employee identification number or a limited liability corporation to qualify for program? You have to have an EIN or an LLC to qualify.
I think that might be, so the question was, do you have to have an EIN number or LLC partnership to qualify for the programs? And so, Congressman Carson, let me just jump in real quick. And then if you wanted to weigh in there, or maybe Stacey wanted to weigh in there, but from what I've seen for the PPP program, and Stacey's been very good about making sure everybody knows there's two different programs for PPP. Yes. It is for a bunch of, it's for small businesses, it's for sole proprietors, it's for partnerships. There's one application and there's several boxes that you can check. So I really recommend it's a one-page application, pull that up. If you have an EIN, it's because that's specific to your business type. If you're a sole proprietor and you don't, then, just take a look at that application. But Stacey or Congressman, I don't want to take up all the airtime.
No, that's good. I couldn't hear Tina's question, but sounds like you answered it.
Yeah, and the next question beneath that is basically the same. She said she was told that she has to have an EIN and is to be considered an actual business like an LLC or partnership to qualify for that program, and wanted to know if that was true.
The self-employed and the independent contractor program doesn't start till tomorrow.
Okay.
So that's a distinction. But also, and I've been failing to mention this, I think the congressman mentioned it earlier, but certain nonprofits are eligible too. It's not just small businesses.
Indeed. Okay. Another viewer writes, what is the last day for applications for the loans?
The PPP right now is set up through June the 30th. So I would assume that's June the 30th. The economic injury disaster loan, there is no deadline as far as I know, right? There probably is actually, but it's probably out in the future. I'm sure there is. I'd have to go research that. Now that I think about that. I haven't had that question asked this week, which is amazing. I thought I had every question asked.
Okay. Is there any concern? I mean, I've heard this voiced as well, that if people can't get to the money quick enough, that it may run out before they can get their application in and processed. Is that a real concern? That the money
Congressman Carson, the question is, people are hearing that the money's going to run out before they can get their application in. And people want to know whether or not that's a real concern. Is the money going to run out?
No. That's the question that came up on the call. Right now, the Democrats were asking for hundreds of billions of dollars. And like with any negotiation, I'm probably saying more than I admit that's reasonable. There were some hardliners on the other side. But there were some of my Republican colleagues of goodwill, many of whom I served on the Financial Services Committee with, who really pushed back, because I don't think this is the time for political posturing. Our businesses are really suffering right now. And so kudos to Republican leadership for being more willing to work with us and really press the administration during this time. And I think the administration understands the importance of small businesses. So I think if we could stay within the hundreds of billions of dollars, especially according to the echoes that we've heard from financial services experts. We had a call with Tim Geithner, former Treasury Secretary, very recently, and he's echoed our sentiment. So I think right now it's best for us to go very high in terms of our numbers. and we could probably scale back the numbers as we go. We move forward, but no, it will not run out. That's a concern that came up on the call. Many of us, especially those of us who are members of the New Democratic Caucus, who are very pro small business, we're pushing back, and it looks like, knock on wood, with the exceptions of some other things that are going to be negotiated on, I think that part businesses don't have to worry about.
Okay, and then a follow-up question. Oh, okay, go ahead, Maria, please.
Just one point on that, and I'm really happy to hear that because, and I'm sure Stacey was seeing this last week too. Last week, there was so much fear, and we were advising people every day, 24/7. Everybody wanted to know, when the application came out immediately, and everybody was so worried that it was going to be gone, even on the first day. I mean, that was the fear, people were going to stay up all night. The businesses were. And I think, Stacey, you might have given some numbers, or maybe Congressman Carson, you did earlier, that 100 billion of the first 350 billion has gone out in a week. So it's not going out as quickly as we were feared, but there is still some fear. We are still hearing that banks are favoring larger small businesses with existing banking relationships, and the smaller small businesses that really need this, that have no runway, that don't have any money in the bank account, aren't getting in. So right. I'm just, sharing what I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard that too. But I think that's probably, if I could presume to speak for people who are listening, that's probably the fear, is that not only is the money going to run out, but that the banks are just going to run out of steam, and they're going to forget about the people who need it the most. So
that's so important, Maria, which is why the number that I touted was 377 billion for the SBA relief, so that small businesses can cover the expenses and paychecks of their employees. It was billion. We're pushing for more as we speak.
So Maria, what have you seen that works in the past, but that has worked, and Congressman Carson can weigh in on this as well? What levels the playing field for those who cannot seem to break through, who are getting hard hit by all this? African Americans, minority, women, all of the above. What helps level the playing field, especially in situations like this?
Yeah. So the question for your benefit, Congressman Carson, is what helps level the playing field in a situation like this? What would work, for a small business that's meeting some resistance? And, my answer to that is knock on more doors. Their barriers to entry are hard. Normally, they're not going to go away. They might even be harder in a crisis, but there are banks and credit unions that exist that are able to make these loans, and willing and are ready to make these loans. And I think now that we're hearing after the first week about some of these issues, more banks are listening. There was just a crush in the beginning, but from where I sit, I get a sense that the banks want to do it. They want to get the money to the smaller businesses. So, I think there was just a frenetic in the beginning. And I think now that everybody's seeing what's happening, everybody's slowing down a little bit, taking a breath, and hopefully it will get easier. But I'm being an optimist. Maybe Stacey or Congressman Carson want to weigh in as well.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I think relationships are important. Relationships with folks like you and Tina and Radio One. And this is one of the reasons why the Democrats blocked the proposal today. Was this very reason. It wasn't expansive enough. We want money to go to smaller banks. We want more conversations. We want more relationships. And those relationships matter in these kinds of times. I know in the late last year, there was this sentiment of this anti-government sentiment. But I think now there's a reawakening that's happening. And unfortunately, it takes a crisis for us to realize we are all in this together, regardless of your race, religion, or political affiliation. Our small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And if we don't help our small businesses, there's nowhere else for us to go. This whole dialogue about this anti-immigrant sentiment, there are immigrants who are coming to our country who are starting small businesses, and they're putting Americans back to work, let alone the African-American businesses, the Latino businesses, the businesses in my district on the south side of Indianapolis who are employing Americans and who are providing phenomenal services. These are the folks who need their government to back them up right now. So this goes beyond politics. So I want to thank Radio One, I want to thank Maria and Stacey,
Yeah.
Tina, for all that you've done in creating this forum, because so many of us need this, and this needs to be an ongoing discussion.
Indeed, indeed. Congressman, you probably already answered this question, but someone sent it in, so I'll ask it again. Is Congress working on adding additional money? And that may even refer to perhaps phase 4 or part 4. I don't know. It doesn't say.
Congressman,
Yeah.
Congressman Carson, there's another question for you. The question is Congress working on adding additional money?
Yes, as we speak. One of the reasons why the proposal was blocked earlier today was because it wasn't expansive enough in terms of dollars.
Okay. Okay. Great. Go ahead. The other question, what qualifies as payroll cost, Maria?
So the definition of payroll costs, and then again, this is just for the PPP loan, not the other loan, but the PPP loan is pretty expansive. You can cover payroll up to $100,000 in compensation per individual, and it covers just about anything. Benefits. It covers. Oh gosh, I usually have a little list in front of me, but it covers a lot of the items that you would normally have in payroll. I can remember off the top of my head what is not covered are federal taxes. And I think those are the federal taxes paid by the employer. And there's one or two other items, but almost everything is covered, including cash compensation or actual salary up to $100,000. But I'm going to defer to Stacey on that as well if he has a better definition of payroll.
I don't remember off the top of my head either, but I think you've covered it all. I think the key is 100,000. It's capped at 100,000 per employee. That's one of the critical components. And on our website at the Paycheck Protection, SBA.gov/paycheck protection website, there is an interim, what they call an interim final rule. That is the guideline, the document that guides that. There are some clear examples of what's considered in payroll costs, and you might take a look at that. It's a 31-page document. You can search through it and find that it has clear information. We don't want to get into the ins and outs of is this or this is not. You're better off looking at the interim final rule so you have clear definition.
Okay.
Again, you have to take that to your lender, and your lender can help you with that as well. It's not something on your own. And I do want to follow up on a question that was asked earlier today, or asked earlier in this, about when do these loans run out. Again, the PPP is set up through June the 30th, as we know. But of course, the Congressman spoke to money might be added. That's what he's working on. So we'll leave it at that. And the economic injury disaster loan is set up for a 9-month term. So again, we were the first in the region to get it, in the Midwest to get it. So ours was declared on March 18th. So right now it's good through December 18th as far as applying for the loan.
Okay. A text message. What about repayment? What do people need to know about repayment? And is there a component of loan forgiveness built into either one of these loans?
Yeah, again, two different loan programs. So I'll just kind of go back through this. This is where people are getting things pretty confused.
Yeah.
Try to explain it the best that I can. The economic injury disaster loan, that is a loan that can be amortized up to 30 years. It goes up to $2 million, up to 30 years. There is a forgivable piece of it, which is that advance, we're calling it. You call it a grant, forgivable, whatever. It's the advance is the technical term that we're using. It goes up to $10,000. It's $1,000 per employee. That was my breaking news that just came out 15 minutes before we started. It's not $10,000 for everybody. It's $10,000 if you qualify, if you have at least 10 employees. Yeah. And so that's the forgivable piece. On the PPP, that program is for 2 years. It's a loan program for 2 years. However, if you use at least 75% for payroll, it can be 100% forgivable.
Yeah, I think people are tuning in at different times because you're right. We have gone on, but hey, we can go over it again. So I've
only done that about 10,000 times in the last 2 weeks.
So, but again, what do people need to? Let's circle all the way back to the very beginning. What is it that people need to know? What do they need to do? How can they apply? And what should they expect in the process? And we want to get people going. If someone is just now tuning in, this is what you need to know if you want to take advantage of this program.
Go to the SBA website, sba.gov/coronavirus. That will get you started where you need to go. You want to apply for the economic injury disaster loan. And when you do that, there'll be an option to apply for the advance, which is the forgivable grant up to $10,000, $1,000 per employee. You want to do that program. and go ahead and get that done. Also, while you're on the SBA website, go to the Paycheck Protection, print the application, go to your lender. You can go up to $10 million for payroll. You can have both loans. I'm surprised this question hasn't came up because this is another common question. You can have both loans. However, they cannot be for the same thing. So the PPP loan is primarily set up for just payroll, to keep your employees on the payroll, to keep them off unemployment. The EIDL program can be used for that, but if you're using it for that, then you can't get the PPP, okay? So you could use the EIDL program for other loans that you have to make payments on that. So that's the distinction. Hopefully that's a little clear.
Yeah. And Maria and Congressman, I would like for both of you to leave our listeners and our viewers with some of your best advice and reminder of what we've talked about throughout the course of the past hour. And I'll start with you, Maria.
Okay, so Congressman Carson, we're being asked to provide our best advice and closing remarks that we want to share with people that we've shared over the past hour. So I'll go first and let you finish off. I just want to say, go to the SBA's website, as Stacey said, look at the two different programs, figure out what your needs are, and really do it on your own. Do as much of it as you can on your own. Really understand what you're getting. Be careful about people, reaching out to you and saying that they can do this for you or they can help you, because there's a lot of, unfortunately, fraud happening out there. But these programs are good. They're there to help you, your businesses, you personally, but also you and your employees, to keep you afloat during this time. And then one thing I do want to say to everybody, and I know we're all thinking about this, but please be safe. I just got my mother out of the hospital yesterday. She was there for a week. And when she went in, I didn't know if I was going to ever see her again. And that feeling in your heart, I can't even describe it. This is real. This is spreading. It's spreading fast. It's spreading through our communities faster. We have to be safe. So please talk to your loved ones, your parents, especially if they're older, your grandparents. Really practice all the things that we know. Wash your hands, stay away, stay home, just stay home. And please be safe, because it touched me and it changed me. So be safe. And thank you so much for letting me participate today.
Maria, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so very much. And we are so glad that your mother is okay and on the mend. Thank you very much. That's frightening indeed. Congressman, any last words of encouragement you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
I'll ask him.
Okay.
I do want to say, Congressman, thank you for your team. We really appreciate everything that they're doing. I can assure the folks out there listening to this or watching this broadcast that if you're contacting Congressman Carson or any of our other congressional folks, we are in constant contact with them, either myself or my deputy, every day. Trust me, every day, multiple times a day. So when we hear when you guys are calling them, they are relaying the message. We are trying to provide information back to them, and his team does a phenomenal job. So with that, Congressman, we're going to let you close and provide some final advice to everyone.
Well, thank you, and my apologies. I don't know what's wrong with the sound. Tina, I'll let the engineers on your side figure that piece out. But I want to thank Radio 1, Tina, Maria, Stacey. And we have a phenomenal team, Team Carson. We're a very small staff, but everyone here is a scholar. They're a public servant, and I just want to reassure folks that continue to advocate, continue to contact us, continue to contact Radio 1, Maria, Stacey, our office. Even though we're not physically in the building, if you call the office number 317-283-6516. We still get those messages, and we still talk about your issues and concerns. And those concerns go back to Speaker Nancy Pelosi leadership, and even we've been trying to temper back on some of the conspiracy theories that have been out there. I get a lot of them from friends and loved ones, and many of them are very intriguing. But as someone by the way, this CARES Act 2 is going to be infrastructure heavy, which means jobs, jobs, jobs. So we're really pushing to have a robust infrastructure plan in this CARES 2 Act. But also I sit on the Intelligence Committee, And one thing's for certain is that during the times where America seems most vulnerable, there are countries, i.e. Russia, China, and others, who will release disinformation and misinformation to cause greater distress amongst the electorate and greater distrust toward the government. But you should know and be comforted, regardless of your race, religion, or political affiliation, that our office, the entire congressional delegation, I think I can speak for them, we're here to help. We see ourselves as true representatives. We go to work, everyone on this platform, I think I can speak for you guys and gals, everyone on this platform, we go to work with a sense of purpose and commitment to our community, and I promise that to you. Call our office. I take my oath very seriously. I'm always here to work and to help and practice social distancing. I know it's hard for extroverts out there, but to Maria's point, Stacey's point, Tina's point, be safe. And as a matter of fact, I need to check on my dad as we speak. He's still lush, but practice so that we're here to help. Thank you.
You know what? Thank you to each and every one of you, Maria, Stacey, Congressman, for all that you've done, all you're doing, and all that you're going to continue to do. I'm gonna go ahead and say, hey, we're going to be calling on you all again probably very soon. So, thank you for everything. Thank you for spending time with us, and thank you for just being here and being present, and for all you do. Also want to thank Radio 1, Dion Livingston, Wendy, Jen, everybody that if I missed anybody, please forgive me. We're just so overwhelmed with the amount of participation that we've had, and all of the good things that were shared today. Hopefully we help someone, and we're going to continue to try to help, and we're going to continue to keep the conversation going. So again, thank you. Thanks everyone. Please stay safe, and we'll be back with you sometime soon. Take care.